Okay. Thank you so much, Sarah. We wanted to begin this evening by taking a moment to recognize the extraordinary life and work of Sarah Weddington. Many of you know she passed away in December, and she was the brilliant attorney who successfully argued Roe v. Wade and was an excellent friend of PPCWNY. I know that many of our staff and our supporters have personal experiences with her and have shared fond memories of her. And tonight and always, we will honor her legacy by building upon her absolutely essential work. In past years, Roe Day has been a time to celebrate just how far our movement has come and also taking a somber look at some of the work that still remains in front of us. I think that we can all agree that this year feels very different. Without mincing words, the outlook for Roe v. Wade is dire. In 2021, we saw the Supreme Court of the United States shift to a more hostile stance on abortion. We witnessed the passage of SB 8 in Texas, a deliberate nullification of the constitutional right to abortion. We also watched in disbelief as the Supreme Court granted review of one question in the Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization case, which is at the heart of Roe v. Wade. And that question is whether all pre-viability prohibitions on elective abortions are unconstitutional. And it will be no surprise to you to hear that the potential for Roe v. Wade to be overturned by the Supreme Court in 2022 is very real. Should that happen by this summer, politicians in about half of US states may be in control of the personal reproductive decisions of their constituents. And this is absolutely unacceptable. Our speakers this evening will be discussing the realities that we are facing this year. And they are also here to remind us that we are defiant, we are strong, and we are not backing down from this fight. We know that people deserve the freedom and the power to make the decisions about their own bodies, decisions about their own lives, and their own decisions about their own futures. And we will do everything in our power to make this freedom the reality in our country. And so our first speaker tonight to speak about this is Michelle Casey, the president and CEO of Planned Parenthood of Central New York. And Michelle, I turn things over to you.
Thank you so much, Maddie. I appreciate the great introduction. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us this evening. Preparing my remarks for tonight felt really odd. Honestly, I'm really worried that this could be the last time that we celebrate the anniversary of Roe v. Wade. And it gives me a heaviness in my chest to even say that out loud. Oddly, as Maddie pointed out, that I actually also feel energized about the work ahead. I don't think we're ever ones to back down in the face of adversity. And I think it's our responsibility to do our best to serve people in Central and Western New York who need our care, and to extend access for those seeking care from other states and work to change the landscape in states around the country. As you know, the Supreme Court has already allowed access to abortion in Texas to be decimated, and has really greenlit the unraveling of abortion protections around the nation. By this summer, the court could officially erase nearly 50 years of precedent and the constitutional right to abortion. In December, after hearing oral arguments, and I don't know if any of you listened to those, but it seems really possible and likely that a majority of the Supreme Court justices are prepared to overturn Roe v. Wade or severely restrict it, which would severely impact people in many states. Should that happen by this summer, as Maddie stated, there's like 26 states who could move to ban abortion, and 36 million women, nearly half of the women of reproductive age from 18 to 49 in the United States, and more people who could become pregnant could lose abortion access. Like that, like think about that, half. It's not, you know what I mean? It's not a tiny number, it's half. And you're all very savvy and know that the right to abortion has never been enough to guarantee access. Over time, politicians have steadily pushed harsher abortion restrictions and policies, putting abortion out of reach for millions, even with Roe in place. There were nearly 600 abortion restrictions introduced in 2021 alone. Like that's like blows my mind. Like there's other things to pay attention to, right? And more than 100 of those were signed into law. You know, that's just an amazing amount of restrictions. It's a record number in any 1 year since Roe v. Wade. It would be a lot if it was in the 49 years since Roe v. Wade, right? Like abortion restrictions like those in Mississippi and Texas disproportionately harm Black, Latino, and Indigenous communities, people with disabilities, people in rural areas, young people, immigrants, and those having difficulty making ends meet. Nearly 1 in 4 women in America will have an abortion by age 45. It is common and essential care. Whether or not the Supreme Court explicitly overturns Roe v. Wade, significant damage has already been done. You can see what's happening in Texas. We cannot be complacent. We must fight for our communities and take proactive measures to protect abortion access. We no longer have a path through the courts. I'm going to say that again. We no longer have a path through the courts. That's done, probably for a generation or two. It's about how we continue to drive the strategy, the grassroots organizing, working with state legislatures, reacting to what happens in the courts, looking at upcoming elections, you know, the midterms and beyond. I am working with a group of people at the national level to really shift our response to this threat. Before we were really focused on bans and weak bans and waiting periods and all the trap law types things, and this has really changed the whole game. It's likely it's going to be a 10 to 15 year arc to get the protections of Roe back nationally. In New York State, we're fortunate to have codified the protections of Roe v. Wade into state law. We're also supporting an effort to pass the Equity Act, which would enshrine equal rights and protection against discrimination into the New York State Constitution. This process to do this, it's like an equal rights amendment for New York, right? But it's also broader. The process includes voting on the bill in 2 consecutive legislative sessions and a ballot referendum. You're going to be hearing more about this from us in the coming months, and I hope that you'll support this work when you learn of the details. We also need the US Senate to take up and pass the Women's Health Protection Act as soon as possible. Not sure if there'll be enough votes there, but I think it's important to put it front and center. The House has already passed this through. And we also need to push for the support of enough lawmakers at all levels of government to ensure anyone can make their own healthcare decisions without political interference. We don't really have any more time to waste. While we're fortunate to have Roe v. Wade codified into law in New York State, our struggle here is having sufficient funding to operate our services and create access for the patients in New York State and from other states seeking care. And then, a trend that's occurring in all of healthcare, the recruiting and retaining of staff. We're working with New York State to advocate for appropriate funding to support our work, as well as for more equitable insurance reimbursement. And for those wondering, we have seen patients from Texas in our clinics. Sort of seems bizarre, right? Because we're in New York. but we've seen them in our Rochester, Batavia, and West Seneca clinics already, and expect a flood of people from Ohio based on the outcome of the Jackson's women's health case at the Supreme Court and the Texas decision at the state court level. We had one person a few weeks ago who came to our Batavia Health Center who had started out in Texas and tried state after state to get a appointment, and because of waiting periods or lack of appointments, they ended up in Batavia, New York, seeking care. Like, that's a long way from Texas. We are currently building a bigger health center in Buffalo, which will create more access to family planning and abortion services. This is expected to open in April 2022, and we've been working hard to complete a similar project in Rochester. There are a lot of barriers to completing these types of projects, even in New York. We believe that no matter where you live or how much money you make, people deserve access to healthcare without barriers or political roadblocks. We should all have the freedom and power to control our own bodies and our own lives. We believe that each patient is an expert in their own life, and that we must trust patients to make their own decisions about their health, their family, and their future. No one can make these decisions for anyone else. We trust people to know their life best. It's their body, their pregnancy, and their unique set of circumstances. We work so that all patients have accurate information about all of their pregnancy options, including adoption, abortion, and parenting, and can make their own personal medical decisions in a safe and respected place. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and I will pass it along.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I'm hearing applause. I know it's there in spirit, I think, and you perfectly captured the feelings that I know I have about that uneasiness, but also that energy to get out there and do the work. So thank you so much. And now we are going to move to Sarah Timmerman, the chapter president of Rochester Now.
Hi, yes, my name is Sarah Timmerman. I am the chapter president of Rochester Now. And this is always my favorite event of the year. Despite all the gloom, it does energize me to have so many people in one room, virtually at this point, who adamantly support abortion access and are working to not only keep it in place, but expand it and recognize that need for expansion. And I know I'm in a room of people who we were all called crazy when we said that this was on the ballot year after year after year. And surprise, we weren't, because we've been studying this, we've been living these experiences, we know what we're talking about. And unfortunately, it has come to pass where it looks like the Supreme Court will, if not explicitly overturn Roe, make it so that it doesn't exist in practicality. I was, you could say lucky. I was able to go to the Supreme Court, not inside of it, but out front the day of the Dobbs v. Jackson hearing. And we were outnumbered about 9-1 in terms of, it was about 90% antis, unfortunately, out front. The Liberty University had bussed several buses of students in who stood around in their matching jackets and held prayer circles near us and were cheering what was happening inside with the court hearing. Despite that, we still got in our little acts of resistance in front of them and showed that we're not gone, that we may be weakened right now, but we're still here. There's still people that support abortion. There's still people that see it as basic healthcare, which is what it is. And I wanted to read what Justice Sonia Sotomayor said today in when the Supreme Court has once again not made a ruling on the Texas abortion ban. She said, This case is a disaster for the rule of law and a grave disservice to women in Texas who have a right to control their own bodies. I will not stand by silently as a state continues to nullify this constitutional guarantee. I dissent. And we really appreciate those strong words because this is a strong issue, and I'm done being told that it's like a niche topic and that it only applies to certain people. This is really something that applies statistically to half the population, but it really applies to the whole population because it takes two to tango. And Barb wanted me to mention some stuff about self-managed abortions because a lot of times that is how it's done through, I didn't want to mess up the name, so I'm on Planned Parenthood's website with Missy Prestone and as well as Missy Bristol. I've had the pleasure of working with the feminist majority for a little while now, who spent about 10 years lobbying domestically, internationally for the legalization of these abortion drugs and pushing what we know is that they are very safe, they are very effective. And the FDA did recently rule to basically permanently allow them. But as we know with anything, just because it's safe and effective in terms of abortion doesn't mean that states will not try to clamp down on it and control it. And so it's another thing to look out for and another avenue we need to be focused on, not just abortions that are done inside the clinic, because these pills can be taken up to 10 weeks. And I was very happy to hear that Planned Parenthood is pushing for an ERA type but expanded constitutional measure in New York State, because that is definitely something we need. Because if it's not explicitly in the Constitution, many judges will say that it's not a right. And at this point, basically everyone besides white men aren't totally explicitly in the Constitution, especially women. Clarence Thomas famously said that the way he reads the Constitution, women are not included. There's no specificity about us. And so I think it's really important that we're pushing for ERA style or explicitly the ERA to be added to national constitution, but to have state constitutions with this is also really good. And it is hard knowing that this could be the 49th and last anniversary of Roe v. Wade, but this event has always had a sort of rebellious element to it. When you tell people that you're hosting an event specifically celebrating abortion, it's not a part of it, it is what the event is. And what I hope is that if we have to go full rebellion with our event, if we have to go full protest with our event, that's what it becomes. If it becomes a day of action where we're helping out clinics, if it's protesting outside of political officials' office, if it's a mixture of both, that we continue with this, even if we're not able to just sit here and talk about the great progress. I remember a couple of years ago, New York State had just passed these new laws and we were going to have everything codified, and Michelle, we were so excited. And it was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Good abortion news. We're really moving in the right direction. And we were just like, wow, this is so great. And our bubble did get popped, but we're not going anywhere. And I can promise you that now it's not going anywhere, that I'm not going anywhere. And we will do everything we can to keep abortion going. And whether that becomes supporting abortion funds to help get people here, to help transport them to these clinics, whatever it takes, I can say for myself, I'm not stepping down for 1 second. And we are going to keep fighting with every breath we have, because the biggest dignity you can give someone is to be able to control what happens inside of their own body. That's just it. That's what we're talking about. You can't force a pregnancy on someone. You can't force them to carry it to term. And that feels really, sorry to swear, it's really fucking basic to me. And that's what it should be. And thank you everyone for being here and making me emotional. This is the topic I feel most passionate about. And I'm not going anywhere. I will protest every day in front of the senator's office when I get out of work if I have to, because this matters. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. You have me so fired up and also feeling a little choked up. That was amazing. Thank you so much we are right here with you is what I wanted to say. We are also not going anywhere. We are right here with you and so thankful for your work and the work of Rochester Now, standing with Planned Parenthood for all these years and for doing this event with us every year as a partnership is really special. Thank you. I'm just looking at the chat. Thank you, Barb. Thank you. Okay, we are going to move on to our next speaker. We are so happy to have Sequoia Kemp join us tonight. Sequoia is the founder of Doula for a Queen and the co-founder and executive director of Sankofa Reproductive Health and Healing Center in Syracuse. Thanks for being here, Sequoia. Take it away.
Much for having me. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much to Planned Parenthood and Rochester Now for having me for a very, very important topic such as this. As Sarah said, my name is Sequoia Kemp, and I am a full spectrum nurse, full spectrum doula, and also a nurse. And so if you don't know what a full spectrum doula is that I provide doula care across the reproductive lifespan. So I provide abortion doula care, labor, postpartum, and I also provide doula care to those who experience miscarriages. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of the modern reproductive justice movement. So if you don't know, reproductive justice term was coined in about 1994, so 27 years ago, when I was not even probably born. And our Black and Brown Indigenous foremothers, they coined this term, reproductive justice, in order for us to envision a world where our rights are revered as human rights. And so we know about human rights is that they should always be honored. They shouldn't be honored sometimes. It shouldn't be based on how other people feel. Every day we should have the right to abortion access, and it should be honored, full stop. And so in 1990s, these women went on to launch the reproductive justice movement. And although it focused on abortion care and access to abortion care, it also focused on a number of other topics. And I want to read these off to you guys. It included comprehensive sex education, contraceptives, STI prevention and care, alternative birth options, adequate prenatal and pregnancy care, adequate labor wages, access to quality housing, and so much more. And it's important that we name all of these aspects of reproductive justice because we must recognize that abortion and access to abortion is not a single issue movement. As a full spectrum doula, I've seen how often Black and Brown people face scrutiny around their reproductive choices. In addition to the fact that this term that we use, reproductive justice movement, was created by women who look like me, but oftentimes when we look at who's at the forefront of these movements or involved in the conversation, many of us are missing. And so I'm hoping that by able to speak up and speak about these issues, that more of Black women, Brown women, Indigenous women will see themselves as part of this movement because it all affects us. Many of those who pursue abortion care are met with judgment, lack of compassion, turned up noses, all for decisions that they made for their life and the life circumstances. And the stigma around abortion is something that I often see in abortion care, of people going through abortions alone. And a term that we often use in doula care is that you cannot raise a family alone, you should not be mourning alone, and you definitely should not be alone after going through an abortion. But because stigma is so strong, people do not share that they are going through this. And a lot of times they hire doulas because we offer that non-judgmental emotional support. There are many people who I love and I care about deeply who have had abortions, and I always try to make sure that they know that their reasons are valid. A lot of times we see people use like, oh, what if a person is raped? What if a person has had a medical condition? And all those reasons are valid. But even if a person decided that that just was not the time for them to become a parent, that is as valid as if they have went through a traumatic experience that resulted in a pregnancy. In our efforts to protect and expand access to abortion, I always ask people to reflect on the ways that remnants of racism and transphobia and classism continue to rear its head in this movement that was rooted in radical love and created out of necessity. We must be unafraid of speaking truth to power, and we must be willing to even name the ways that New York State continues to uphold oppressive policies, as well as systems of belief that harm birthing people and Black and Brown families. There are bills such as the New York Health Act, the Community Midwifery Bill that could really change the material conditions of people who are living in New York State. And we need these bills, we need these legislation to get passed because we know that it can make a difference. I also am very big on showing up boldly. When I'm not at births, I'm oftentimes at protests. When I'm not at protests, I'm somewhere strategizing, building, trying to say, how can we make sure that everyone knows that this is an issue that is affecting all of us? And so we must show up boldly and continue to, fight for the protection of abortion care while also urging those on the state and federal level to implement changes that will uphold the standards of reproductive justice that was outlined decades ago by those that later became called Sister Song. They are the ones who were coined the term reproductive justice. And I also believe that we must have the self-determination to change and look forward to building collective power. And collective power must be built across socioeconomic status. It should be built across gender, built across race. And I know that I'm here because I am in the trenches, as we say, fighting to hold people after they go through this situation. And I hope that we can work together to serve our community at large, but also our local communities, both in Rochester and Syracuse. So I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation with you all tonight. And I thank you all so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Sequoia. Thank you for the really important work that you do as a doula and as an advocate for these issues. It's so nice to have you here tonight and to hear your perspective on these things. We are now moving on to Damien Denner. Damien is one of the co-directors of ROC.SRJ, which stands for Rochester Sexual and Reproductive Justice Task Force. Take it away, Damien.
Good evening, everybody. As Sarah said, I'm here tonight representing Rochester Sexual and Reproductive Justice Task Force. Some of what I'm going to speak about will sound repetitive because it is, but it seems that these messages need to be repeated and still they don't resonate with everybody. ROC.SRJ was started in 2016 by a group of passionate local health educators and advocates who understood that our city was in need of amplifying the voices of people who have been omitted from the conversation surrounding our bodies and our rights. ROC.SRJ believes sexual and reproductive justice exists when all people have autonomy, resources, and rights to make decisions about their bodies, reproduction, and sexual lives with dignity. We're inspired by New York City's SRJ chapter and Sister Song, the largest national multi-ethnic reproductive justice collective. As you've heard, the term reproductive justice was coined in 1994 by Black women who recognized that the middle class and wealthy white women who often lead women's rights movements could not defend the needs of women of color and other marginalized women and trans people, and they would need to lead a movement of their own. I highly recommend you check out Sister Song if you haven't seen their work yet. They are still incredibly active and they're just a quick search away. It's important for everyone who's here today to understand that abortion restrictions are rooted in anti-Blackness. Restricting reproductive autonomy is not new, and in this country, it's tied to the enslavement of Black and brown bodies. Abortion restrictions continue to impact Black and brown bodies at higher rates. We know when abortion is not legal, the burden of accessing safe abortions falls harder on Black and brown communities and people with disabilities. Today, I'm hoping that we're surrounded by advocates and activists. Some of you have been here for a long time, and some of you are just tiptoeing into what activism might mean for you. I want you to leave this Zoom with some understanding of what you can do today to make moves towards achieving reproductive justice and addressing harmful abortion restrictions. Sister Song has identified 4 things that people should do to achieve reproductive justice: analyze power systems, address intersecting oppressions, center the most marginalized, and join together across issues and identities. Many of you are already doing the work, but we can always do better. We need to center trans and non-binary folk, Black, brown, and Indigenous folk, and everyone the reproductive justice movement often doesn't include. We need brave spaces to discuss the realities of abortion and challenge misconceptions. And we do this by starting to educate our communities. We do this by implementing comprehensive sex education. We do this by expanding conversations at our dinner tables starting today. Before we leave this space, we need to take a moment to honor all of the people who have come before us, fighting for the rights to our own bodies. We need to create space in our fight for marginalized groups like incarcerated women, people without access to accurate sexual health information, and victims of crisis pregnancy centers. We will continue to fight to change the laws of this nation so that the generations that come after us no longer have to have this fight. And based on some of the remarks we've heard today, it sounds like generations after us may still have to be part of this fight. So it's important that we continue to work together, band together as communities, and fight the burnout that I know so many of us feel. And I think fighting that burnout comes with community and solidarity and sisterhood, and understanding that this fight is one of the most important fights and that we can continue the fight.
Thank you so much, Damien. Thank you for coming to speak tonight. I was so excited to be able to hear from you on behalf of ROC.SRJ. I'm a part of ROC.SRJ, and it's one of my greatest joys. And I know that our work is so important in that group and in our community. Yes, Krista in the chat, ROC.SRJ Pride. And little plug, we have a Beyond Birth conference happening next week. If you're interested, feel free to reach out to me after the event and I'll tell you all about it. Thank you, Damien. Now we have a couple of videos to share. A couple of our wonderful elected officials weren't able to join us tonight. They are very busy people, but they were gracious enough to send us videos. So they are still here with us in spirit. So first, we are going to watch a video that was provided by New York State Senator Samra Brook, who is a great friend to Planned Parenthood and a great fighter in this fight for reproductive justice, for comprehensive sex ed. So let me share my screen. Bear with me for a sec. Somebody give me a thumbs up if you can hear it when I press play.
Good evening, everyone. While I'm disappointed that we couldn't be together to celebrate 49 years of Roe, I'm glad that so many of you are gathered in observance of this important anniversary. This is such a
There's no sound.
Can you hear me?
There was sound and then it stopped, Sarah.
I muted myself and I wonder if that's why. So let me rewind a bit.
Reproductive rights in our nation. And the significance of this anniversary is not lost on me. In 2021, we saw an unprecedented amount of attacks on reproductive justice and bodily autonomy. There was SB 8 in Texas that empowered vigilantism to report women exercising their own bodily autonomy. But there were also smaller laws that didn't garner as much attention, but are equally, if not more, abhorrent. There was Tennessee's paternal veto legislation that would allow fathers a final veto before a pregnant person can obtain an abortion. And there were countless pain-capable bills and ultrasound bills introduced in states like Florida, Hawaii, New Jersey, Montana, and Oregon. Here in New York, there is temptation to put on blinders and assume that because we live in a state that has codified Roe, all will be well. I'm here to tell you that's not true. In New York, anti-choice bills are introduced every legislative session. Thankfully, with a pro-choice Democratic control of both houses, these bills don't get traction. But that doesn't mean they never will. Why do I tell you this? It isn't to scare you. It's to fire you up, to energize you, to renew your commitment to the work that our sisters in Texas, South Carolina, Florida, and so many other places are depending on. Here in New York, we know we must continue to lead the way for reproductive justice. Because we know that if our opponents are successful, they won't just overturn Roe, they will chip away at it piece by piece until there's nothing left. That's why I am proud to be a vocal champion for reproductive rights in the state legislature. It's why I carry legislation that would require schools to teach sex education so young people can make safer, healthier decisions. It's also why I carry the Reproductive Equity Act that would require insurers in New York to cover abortion care the same way they cover maternity care. In a time when our rights are being rolled back across the nation, we must unabashedly push forward. Together, we can ensure that New York remains a beacon of hope to those in states who insist on moving backward. Together, we can ensure that Roe makes it to its 50th, 60th, and 100th anniversaries. Thank you.
Clapping for Senator Brooke. It's amazing that even just through a video, she is still such a powerful speaker. We're so happy to have her as a partner in this fight. And shout out to her pink scarf. I noticed. Nice touch. Okay, let me share my screen again, actually, because we are now going to watch a video from Senator Gillibrand.
Hi, I'm Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, and I am honored to join Planned Parenthood of Central and Western New York and Rochester now as we celebrate the 49th anniversary of Roe v. Wade, one of the most consequential decisions for women's rights in our country. Access to reproductive freedom gives women the ability to decide when and if they become parents and allows them to decide for themselves what their futures will look like. Access to healthcare is a basic human right, but for women, that right is being threatened every day. You can count on me to stand beside you in this ongoing fight. I will continue to defend the right of every woman to be able to access the care she needs. On the federal level, I'm fighting to pass the Women's Health Protection Act. That bill would codify Roe v. Wade and tell state governments around the country that they cannot legislate a decision that should be made between a woman and her doctor. Passing that bill into law will be hard, but I am up for the task. We may have to reform the filibuster to make it happen, and I fully support that if that's what it takes. I will also keep fighting to repeal the Hyde Amendment, which threatens low-income women's ability to access an abortion. No one should be kept from the health care they need because of where they live or the amount of money they have. I will continue working with you to lift up the voices of women, and together we will continue to defend and advance the cause of reproductive freedom. Thank you for all that you do.
Claps for Senator Gillibrand. We are so lucky to have her fighting for us on the national level. We're very lucky to have her as a partner in this. So thank you to her and her office for being kind enough to send along a video, and Senator Brooke when they are extremely busy, but they still make time for this issue. Okay, let me pull my stuff back up here. We have one more speaker tonight. I am happy to introduce Elizabeth Moribito. She is the Finger Lakes Regional Representative for Governor Hochul, and we are so happy to have her here tonight on behalf of Governor Hochul's office. So take it away, Elizabeth.
Hey, thank you, and good evening. It's wonderful to be here with all of you tonight and to listen to all of the fabulous speakers that have come before me. I have the honor, I think, of being the last one, which means I get to hear what everybody else says and, you know, wonder if I should change all my remarks. But, you know, on just a personal note, I was reflecting back, and, you know, the first time I attended this event was about 5 years ago. That was when Congresswoman Slaughter was there. And, you know, I just think about where we were then during the Trump administration and where we are now. Obviously, a lot has changed. But I think for all of us, our commitment to reproductive justice has stayed the same, if not become even stronger. You know, as was said, I am here on behalf of Governor Kathy Hochul, and I am very proud to be here with all of you today to honor the anniversary of the Roe v Wade decision and say loud and clear, we will not accept the Supreme Court or any politician taking away the right to safe, legal abortion. As we've heard from the speakers tonight, legislatures in states across the country have spent years compromising reproductive rights, leading us to the dangerous national landscape that exists today. And we know who bears the burden when access to abortion is restricted. It's people with low incomes, women of color, immigrants, LGBT community. This is an attack on our fundamental rights. And, you know, Governor Hochul and New Yorkers, we are ready to be warriors in this fight, as we always have been. As many of you know, in 1970, New York was 3 years ahead of the rest of the nation in legalizing the right to abortion. And thousands of women who needed help came to New York when they didn't have anywhere else to turn. New York was a safe haven then, and now, as other states restrict abortion access, New York will be a safe haven once again. 3 years ago, New York passed the Reproductive Health Act. I know many of you were involved in that fight. Since taking office, Governor Hochul has worked to build on that historic legislation. In her State of the State address that was given, I think, just 2 weeks ago, you know, Governor Hochul made a commitment to fund family planning providers across the state, support safety net providers who have been our heroes during this pandemic, and guarantee private insurance coverage for abortion under New York state law. Abortion is already covered by Medicaid in New York, unlike many other states. You know, earlier this fall, she directed state agencies led by the Department of Health to launch a public information campaign to make sure everyone knows their rights when it comes to abortion access. She also directed the Department of Health to immediately develop and distribute modern and comprehensive provider guidance on the right to abortion care. This work is currently underway, you know, and it's done in partnership with reproductive health providers and advocates across the state. And, you know, we're obviously at the beginning of some of this, and, you know, but please know, my number one message I want all of you to know is that Governor Hochul is committed to continuing this work and making sure that anyone across the country who needs an abortion can find a safe harbor here in New York. We stand with you today and every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and by extension, thank you to Governor Hochul. We're so glad that you could join us at the last minute. I was so excited that you'd be joining us so we could hear your voice. We're so happy to have Governor Hochul's support on the state level and know that she is a huge advocate for these issues. Thank you, everybody. That concludes the speaker portion of tonight. And we don't quite have 30 minutes like we had planned for Q&A, but we will get to as many questions as we can. So feel free to start putting them in the chat and we'll get to as many as we can. Let's see, first one from Barbara Moore. I've heard that California is considering becoming a sanctuary state for abortion. What does that mean? And is that something we should push for in New York? And I guess that anybody who wants to respond is welcome to unmute yourself and respond.
You can do it if nobody else wants to.
Multiple people are also welcome to chime in. Go ahead, Michelle.
So basically what they're trying to do in California is to make sure that, they have a lot of abortion providers in California. And so they're trying to make sure that access is available to people from other states, that state funding is available to pay for abortion care and to try to include patient navigation and that type of thing, so that it's a safe harbor for people coming and trying to limit the barriers as much as possible. We do have, there's a Planned Parenthood sponsored and a broader reproductive health sponsored tool that people can use if they need to find an abortion. You basically put in where you live and it can show you like what the closest providers are and what the various hoops are you'll have to need to jump through. The good thing about California is they don't have a waiting period. They're, you know what I mean? That you can just go and have an abortion and you don't have to stand on your head and spin around 3 times and see the same doctor 4 times. And, so.
Thanks, Michelle. Anybody else want to add to that? All right, feel free to put your questions in the chat. I have one question of my own, but I'll save that for the end. So I'll let you all have a chance. Thanks, Michelle. Yes, abortionfinder.org is that website.
I don't have a question, but I did have a comment in response to Sarah and we were talking about alternative methods of abortion care. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about was so doula care. I'm trained to be a community-based doula. And so a lot of our care is rooted in the practices that our granny midwives have utilized when there wasn't standards and, birth and everything wasn't medicalized. And so I've been thinking about, as we are fighting for the right to have medicalized abortions, how there is a need for more education around herbal abortion methods and having alternative practitioners beyond providers, but herbalists, midwives, things of that nature, who can really band together and provide this service to folks, whether while we are, fighting for continuing to have methods available to us. So Sarah, I was, very grateful for you to also point out that although medication can be mailed to people, again, still going through that, it can be a very, it can be traumatizing, even if you've made that decision, just the body, the physical pain, the things of that nature. And so as we are fighting to make sure the right is protected, we also have to make sure that we have systems and infrastructure of communal care to support people as well. And so I just wanted to comment based on what you said about the need to have that access and alternative options.
Thank you for that, Sequoia. Yes, feel free to jump in if you have any additional thoughts that come up for you. Barbara has another question. Will telemedicine have a role in providing abortions in states that outlaw the procedure, presuming, potentially post Roe v. Wade, all of these states who have these trigger laws that can essentially ban abortion completely in their state will telemedicine play a bigger role.
It would, like, telemedicine is going to play a bigger role, period, in the abortion landscape. The trouble is that in states where they're going to limit abortion access, they're going to limit abortion access through telemedicine as well. They'll just be able to make it illegal at whatever the cutoff date is that is deemed constitutional, whether that be at all or 6 weeks or 15 weeks or so there would be, telemedicine is a very safe way to do abortion care. There are sites where people can receive medication that are not onshore. They can order medications from places that give you instructions about what to do and how to do it. The only downside to that is it's nice to, as Sequoia said, have some kind of person to walk you through, or if you have a problem, somebody you can consult with, or if for some reason the abortion doesn't complete, then you can follow up to have miscarriage management, those types of things. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, I would just add, as Michelle's saying, that it's going to come under the same laws. Unfortunately, we are not sneaky and able to do these things, and they don't notice that we've moved to telemedicine. They're under the same type of laws because you're still practicing the medicine in the state. And it depends. So for doctors, you really have to be fully above board all the time, obviously. And so it's going to come under the same laws and restrictions.
What we're seeing in Texas, about 50% of the people are going without care. And then there's a portion that get care in Texas because they are under the 6-week threshold, and then others who are self-managing or traveling. But there's just heartbreaking story after heartbreaking story about, there was this one woman who was a recent immigrant who already had 5 children and was pregnant and wanted an abortion, and she was just over 6 weeks, and so she couldn't get it. And they said, well, we can pay for you to travel out of state. And she might as well have had to go to a trip to the moon to try to travel out of state. Like her husband, it was important that he not know. And, and she already had 5 children to care for. And it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah, one of the stories that sticks with me was a woman who found out she was pregnant, wanted an abortion, got COVID and had to quarantine for 10 days at the time, whatever it was. And by the time she was able to get to her doctor's office, she was over that 6-week threshold. Yeah, it's just crazy. And that also makes me think to plug really quick. Next week, we have another event talking about the intersection of abortion and intimate partner violence and how abortion restrictions and bans can impact survivors of intimate partner violence. So check out our Facebook page for the event. If you're on our distribution list, you'll get a link to sign up for that, but that'll be with Restore and Willow, and we'll talk about a lot of these things. I will go ahead and ask my final question to wrap up for the night, to leave us on kind of a call to action note here. I wanted to get your thoughts from all of our speakers on how our supporters, how the folks who are here tonight and the folks who weren't able to join us tonight but care a lot about this, how can they help to protect and expand access to abortion, either locally, on the state level, on the national level? What is one kind of concrete thing that they can do? Because I know that that's a question that we at Planned Parenthood any similar organization we get all the time, what can we do? Because we often feel just helpless and hopeless. So any thoughts or calls to action that you have?
A lot of different legislative ways of helping have been proposed tonight. And so I will just add that in addition to supporting these legislations and calling your politicians, also it was mentioned briefly, but in conversations with family members, friends, colleagues, normalizing reproductive justice procedures, normalizing seeking out this care, that this is an option. Obviously, we're not saying you have to get an abortion. We're just saying it's an option and you should have that option. And I've done this previously in other settings. It's so radicalized and it's so made to be this hyper political issue that honestly, just having honest conversations about it is a huge way of destigmatizing the issue so we can move forward into conversations in a healthcare way versus a political way. And obviously that's in addition to like calling your politicians, which we had our senator, my personal state senator, and then our state senator, our national senator talking tonight about how they support these bills. It's always good.
I'll go next. My first and foremost thing is to donate to community-based organizations. So there are many organizations like Sankofa, Dilla for a Queen, but other things that are Black-led, that are rooted in the reproductive justice movement, who often aren't able to get funding from the state due to bureaucratics and due to a lot of the systemic issues. So if you know folks who are doing this work and are providing that communal care, we need funding. We need monetary support, but also amplification. In addition, I would urge you to talk to your state legislators about passing bills such as the Midwifery Bill. So we are trying to have certified professional midwives be licensed in New York State to expand access to community midwifery care. We know that community midwives have the knowledge and expertise to provide safe midwifery care, and midwives provide care across the lifespan. So that is just one way to increase the number of practitioners and individuals who can provide comprehensive testing as well as education. And then thank you, I think it was Damien, for highlighting the need to know our history as far as who Sister Song is. Many of this, like we all have said, this fight is not new, and there is so much information and historical knowledge that we can use to continue to mobilize each other. And so if you could just be that one person who someone in your family or community knows that they could come to and say, hey, I'm thinking about having an abortion. Can you support me? Showing up is sometimes it's the best thing you can do, even if you don't have the words, even if you don't have all the resources. Just saying, I'll be here with you throughout the process is a huge factor in helping to make sure that despite legislation, whether it's because the thing I tell people is that whether the law is passed or not, we still have work to do. So knowing that although we are at this fight, we're not lost. There are tools that many of us community-based doulas and birth workers have been doing for many years. And so just join the fight with us and continue to uplift our work. So thank you.
Yes.
I would say to try to really promote evidence-based sex education. One of the things that works best in this arena is to really know about your body and your own wants and needs and how things happen and how to not have things happen if you don't want them to, right? Like having access to birth control is super important, and really like bringing it out of out of the closet. We're like really having these conversations with people. In Texas, I know that they've done these little care packages for people with like condoms and a Plan B pill and things like that. And so, there's a lot of ways that you can sort of be prepared. And one of my friends was a Girl Scout troop leader, and I always think about her in this respect. She's always like, preparation is the key to life. And so, having access to birth control, maybe having Plan B on hand, maybe, knowing what your options are, I think would be great. And what already has been mentioned, of course.
When I had started putting together a list of what I thought would be really great actionable items, most of what's already been said was on my list. And I was seeing in the chat some feelings of hopelessness. And when it comes to like actionable things, I think the beauty with actionable items is they are what you are comfortable with. So they could be very simple to being out and speaking to people and really like going hard. One of the things that I think can be really helpful when writing to your representatives is it doesn't always have to be, here's a law that I think you should be pushing. You can also send thank you notes. You can write to the people you saw tonight and tell them, I appreciate the thing that you're doing and that it really means a lot to me. We don't often thank the people who are really uplifting this movement all of the time. So even something as simple as a thank you message, I think can go a really long way. I also wanted to shout out the Radiant Wellness, and bringing a midwifery-led birth center to Western New York was one of my important things. The comprehensive sex education in grades K through 12 through the Senate was one of my important things. Donating your time and money, especially to abortion access funds and things that are related to abortion access. So not necessarily procedures in medicine themselves, but things like transportation and lodging costs can be incredibly important. I'd also like to highlight learning about the crisis pregnancy centers that are here in our community and finding ways to warn other people against those types of centers and really understanding what they do. And those were my big things, but definitely I think start with thanking people. If you're nervous about getting involved, that can be a really great way to start to tiptoe your way into involvement.
I would just echo what everybody else has said. Like, I also had a list and everyone's covered it. I'm sorry, my cat is wrapping herself around the computer, so her tail keeps coming in the screen. I'm sorry. I would just say, I'm speaking here as somebody who's worked in government for years and also had a lot of involvement on the political side of things, is know your elected officials and also know candidates. There's a lot of areas in the state where, yes, the numbers wise, the person might not win, but they should put up a fight. And I think it's really important to hold elected officials accountable. And this is work that can be done, not just in New York, not just with your own representatives. Obviously, you should contact them when it comes to, your opinion and your laws and all of that. However, in other states, there are plenty of ways to help candidates or show your support for an elected official who's not your own. And I would just say that's, especially now with computers and phones and all the different things that we can all do in social media to help amplify somebody's message. And when you're talking about, a statewide race, a state race, or even smaller than that, even more local, any little bit makes a huge difference. So that would just be my little plug on top of what everybody else said, and especially supporting the community-based organizations and all of you that are doing this incredible work. So just speaking for Planned Parenthood, and now you guys are the ones that are really leading. And we as elected officials, and I'm not an elected official, but representing one, we look to you because you're on the ground and you're doing this hard work day in and day out. And we follow your lead in terms of what you need and how to best serve communities. So.
Thanks, Elizabeth. getting a lot of thanks in the chats. Lots of great call to action ideas. If you haven't been looking at the chat, I recommend scrolling through. There are a lot of great ideas in here, some different organizations to support and check out. Reach out to them and ask what the best way to support them is. And as we've mentioned throughout the night, just coming together and talking about these things and getting rid of the stigma that is still so strong when we talk about abortion is also a really great way to normalize abortion, because it's healthcare and it's normal and it's common. So on that note, I think we have some good ideas to roll with moving forward. You know, it's a really tough time right now, but I am always makes me feel better and energized when I'm with a group of people here like tonight, because it reminds me that we are all in this together. So thank you all for coming. This recording of the event will be up on the Planned Parenthood YouTube channel probably tomorrow. So if you have folks who wanted to come tonight but weren't able to come be here live, feel free to send it over to them. And just thank you all again. Thank you to our speakers and to everybody who came out tonight. All right. See you guys soon.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Everyone.
Thank
Have
you.
a good evening.
Bye, everyone.